I'm glad you're here. And family, I want to know that we have Brother Lester Lovings on, and we scheduled this a month ago, and we're looking forward to it because of the eclipse that's coming through and the power of that particular eclipse, and how does that eclipse relate to us. So I'm very happy to do it. You can tell my ring rust. I've been off since maybe May or June. We haven't did any shows, so it's showing my ring rust actually. But anyway, I want to welcome you and thank you, Brother Lester, for coming on. And if you do, while I get everybody together, if you want to start the bill, since we started, it looks like they've gotten rid of all my music, and then as we do, I'll make sure I get people in. So, family, what I do, I want to give you Brother Lester Loving, and we're dealing with some of the energy of the eclipse. Peace, brother. How are you?
Fine.
And I guess the question, initially my first question, but I want to wait. But the question is, as we retrain ourselves as people of color, what are some of the things you think that are important that we should keep in mind about this equator, and how can some of that power be maximized so that we can harness that energy for us in the upcoming 5 years or so?
Okay, that's an excellent question. I'm gonna have to back up a little bit, simply because the significance of this equator now really began at December the 21st, 2012. And the Mayan calendar informed us that at that time that was going to be the end of not only a cycle but a series of cycles. And they had predicted that it was the end of time as we know it. Of course, the common culture that we live in translated that into it was the end of time. And so naturally, they had disaster movies and people getting ready for some traumatic event. The calendar that the Mayans work with has several cogs or wheels, and so they have long cycles, short cycles, and shorter cycles. The next phase of the turning, it informed us the next significant point was going to be 4 years and 8 months from from that time period, which just so happens to be now. And they predicted that there was going to be an interim period where there would basically be no time and all time, that all the influences of the last 4 cycles were going to be flooding in, and then there was going to be sort of a reset where we would start the cycles over again, but in a much different way. So this is the time period that we're talking about now, and for the next 5 years, what is significant is that, of course, an eclipse has to do with first of all, I should say that eclipses always come in pairs, and so we had a lunar eclipse 2 weeks ago, and now we're having the solar eclipse. And they're always 2 weeks apart, and they happen twice a year. In this particular one, the eclipse will be falling across the entire parameter of the United States. And this is the first time that has happened in 99 years. So, as we know, the number 9 has to do with completion on the physical level, and the fact that it's a double 9, which leads, of course, to 100, means that we're having an all-new beginning. Now, the fact of the matter is that when many people are trying to go to the most powerful direct falling of the shadow or the umbra, because that is the most concentrated part of the energy. As far as answering your question now, what we should be first of all looking at are the things that pop up at this time period, because the shadow, of course, comes from a light source that hits an object and then forms the shadow behind it. And as we know, many times when the light is shining on that object, the shadow will be bigger than the object itself. So we need to not just look at what the image is, or in other words, what's directly happening to us, but to look at the greater potential, how that image is expanding out and, so to speak, growing. So I say all that to say that when certain things happen, we don't necessarily jump or react to the thing in its immediacy, not in the way it appears, but what its potential is. What is the word in English we use is it's foreshadowing, or it's what can grow from that. Now, from a cosmological point of view, that is to say, when we look at the astronomy of the time period that we are in at this moment, we have not only Mercury retrograde, but we have the 4 outer planets in our solar system are retrograde as well. And those 4 outer planets, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, all have a much longer solar cycle. That is to say that they spend many years in the same sign before they cross over into another astrological sign. The fact that they are retrograde means that we need to go back and look at our long-term plans and also our long-term hopes and dreams. So first, let's deal with the dreams. And when I say dreams, I don't just mean things that are revealed to us in our sleeping state, but what our inner yearning or calling is, what we are meant to do, or what we came here to do. And so sometimes in the heat of the moment or the compilation of emotions, we may have forgotten about those callings or yearnings, or they may have been drowned out by more immediate things like our day-to-day, paying the bills and getting through traffic. But it's the time that we need to go back. We need to spend some time meditating, contemplating, going over old diaries, looking at our yearbook, looking at what, and even further back even, to see what is it or what was it that we felt that we needed to do or contribute in our earthly plane time. The short term, Mercury, of course, has to do with communication. And so logical thought, making contracts, moving forward, and trying to make things progress is not necessarily the call of the day. It's more a time of tuning into our intuition, literally going with the flow, but paying attention, as I said before, not just to what is immediately happening, but what the greater potential of those things are. So if there are positive things, then we don't just look at the immediate reward, but we say, how can we build upon that? If it's what we call negative things, then we go back and we remember when we had those situations before, and how can we build or restructure our business plan or our game plan so that we don't have to go through those same things again. So now, okay, that's a long introduction, but to answer your question, we really need to have a 5-year plan, a 20-year plan, a 50-year plan, and a 100-year plan. And each one of those are basically guidelines. I don't mean that in the sense of those are the exact numbers, but what I mean is that we should start looking at our long-term endeavors and figuring out what we need to do in the short term, the medium term, the long term, and what do we need to foundationally do so that when others are going to carry on the tasks of what we have built in our foundation, how they can carry on these projects once we are gone.
I'm here. I'm
Hello?
sorry. I'm trying to get folks in. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So their question is, at the start of the eclipse, what type of ritual should they do in terms of looking at the creation of their plans? You know, or prior to that, should they write a script of their plans to get into this creative energy? Do they need candles? Do they need incense? What would you propose that they do?
I always feel that each person should do the rituals that they already are comfortable and familiar with. What I am more suggesting is that we, for the next, until Monday, that we really sit down and map out some of the things that we think we want to get done, but more so than what we think we want to get done, to pay attention to the things that are coming toward us. Pay attention to the synchronicities, or what most people call coincidences. Pay attention to those things, because those are literally signs from the universe as to where we should go and where we shouldn't go, or how we should act, or how we should no longer act. And then, as far as rituals are concerned, it's obvious, because so many people are going to somewhere where they can be in the umbra or the darkest part of this thing, to take that time, to dedicate that time to stopping, to literally take a time out and to be still and let the universe, well, first of all, if anybody that's going to an area where they can see the totality, as it's scientifically called, of the eclipse should appreciate the fact that, it's time for us to be still. It's time for us to take a time out and to just appreciate the magnificence and the glory of the celestial operations. Now, that's a big, long-winded way of saying that we should look at and hopefully marvel at the workings of the sun and the moon and how they interact. Looking at the eclipse, we should see the sun and the prominences that are coming off of the sun. Now, prominences, once again, is a scientific term, and it simply means that we all know that the sun is radiating energy, but usually when we look up in the sky, all we see is this big, round, what appears to be yellow ball. When we look on Monday and we're able to look up in the sky and hopefully see, and of course everybody tells you don't look directly at the sun, but if you're looking through a screen, if you've got a pinhole and you're looking on the ground at it, you should be able to see some of the swirling, dancing energies that are around the edge of the sun. Those are known as the prominences, and those simply are revealing the magnetic fields and some of the cosmic rays and other elements that are coming off of the sun. The sun, of course, is very generous and is forever giving. And so that's the first thing that we should really pay attention to, is that we need to get into a position in life where we're able to give off our maximum freely, openly, and with no conditions. So that's part of what we should put into our long-term plans, is how and in what steps do we need to take in order to be in the position where we can constantly give off those things the universe has allowed us to acquire. Secondly, we should appreciate the fact that the sun, and of course, the sun as we experience it, is light, or I should say more specifically, visible light. However, at that time period, we will notice the sun is surrounded by the corona, and the corona, of course, is black or dark. So even though we experience the sun as being visible light, the visible light that we see is actually coming through the corona. And that is specifically why the ancient Kemetic people, or what we now call the Egyptians, why they said it was Amen-Ra, because Ra is, of course, the sun ray as is visible light, and Amen, of course, means the hidden or the darkness. And they most appropriately named the sun Amen-Ra because it's the combination of the hidden and the revealed that makes up the celestial orb. And in fact, that's what makes us up as well, just in a different composition. So a great deal of the time, our truest power is hidden, or it's what we think we are is what we give off, and in fact what we are. But a great deal of our energy and power is hidden from us, and other people's power is hidden from us as well. So hopefully looking at the sun or the sun at that time will help us to spend a little bit of time every day looking beyond the physical rays and looking and seeing the totality of our own power and other people's power. That's, once again, a long-winded way of saying that we need to spend a little bit of time, appreciating who we are and what and how we give off our energy. And then as we appreciate our own selves, we can appreciate what others are giving off and how we can combine those energies together and work through and work out this situation that we find ourselves in.
Peace. I appreciate that. And I'm slowly getting people in, and I'm moving them back to the website. So I apologize, family. That's my fault. I've been on this state, brother, where I run home and go to bed because I'm gonna wake up at 3:00 in the morning and don't go back to sleep until when I get off work again. So I apologize to you because I have been shut down. That's how much I respect you and love that you're part of the Ring and Star Network. I've been shut down. So you're actually the first show that I did, and I had not intended on doing the show till you called me, and I was like, well, we're going to go back online. So glad you did call me. Always do. So I appreciate you. My thing right now, I want to go back to the beginning, and then I'm going to get somebody else in. You may hear a little phone conversation, but hopefully it don't detract you because they didn't block a lot of people except the people that's on the website. So I'm trying to bring in a few people that want to sit down. Like I had a numerologist invited. Brother Kasim is trying to get on too, and they're basically blocking those callers from getting on. But let's go back to the size of the moon. So, because some people say the size of the moon was designed, and the only reason we have an eclipse is because they sculptured the size of the moon perfect from the distance of the sun. And if the moon was, a foot bigger or a foot smaller, we would not have that perfect corona or blocking out the sun. So is that fate, or was that engineering by a superior race?
I've heard this on many occasions, and I do not have enough scientific data to answer that concretely. What I will say is that is a pretty miraculous coincidence, and one of the things that we know from the records that the Mayans and the ancient Egyptians left us is that the moon used to be closer to the earth than it is now. And in fact, it inches away literally every year. And coincidentally, the earth used to spin faster than it does now. So even though, so that relationship probably has remained, even though it was closer to us and we were spinning faster. The amount of time that the eclipse occurs would probably remain the same. And so that's right there. That's some engineering. I can't say who did it or how that happened. That's a pretty amazing universal constant.
Okay, so it could be that I may have heard some ancient aliens, and it's not true. Maybe challenging you. I just, there are people that say that the Earth and the Moon came from the asteroid belt, and when that occurred, then those are the two particular big bodies that bounced out into this particular orbit, and it just so happened that the Moon was. Based on the size of the moon, it gives you that eclipse. Some say that.
Well, I mean, brother, we could talk all day about what some people say, but it is interesting that there is some scientific evidence that has been examined. There's more than one group of scientists that have told us that the moon is actually older than the Earth. So. Right there. I mean, let me go back, okay? Let me go back and say that when people hear the word science, they believe, or we've been led to believe, that science is about concrete facts and established understandings. If that were true, then we wouldn't have to study as hard as we do, and we wouldn't be picking up the paper every year and having a different interpretation of everything from diet to the fact that, at the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, people believed that, there was only one galaxy in the universe. Science is an investigation of data, and it has just as much to do with our own interpretation and also our relationship to this universe. So as we get different data, we tend to have a different understanding of our relationship to the universe. These are ongoing pursuits, and at the same time, it is pretty, it's pretty amazing that the further back we go, there are certain things that ancient people studied that are as accurate or more accurate than the data that we take in now. So, that all that's still open. In other words, what I'm saying is that science is about examining everything. And so it is just as likely that, these things that we hear that ancient people said or other people say, is just as likely that those things are true as the modern scientific interpretation. I mean, all you got to do is think about, drinking milk, or, starch is good for you. Starch is no good for you. Cholesterol is good. Cholesterol is bad. No, there's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, So each person has to evaluate what these things are and what they mean to them. And then, of course, we tend to attract people who believe the same things we do. One of the most fascinating things to me in the scientific community is that no matter what theory that we come up with, part of coming up with that theory is, part of proving that theory is not just gathering as much data as we can and working out that works, but is required by us to take the opposite of that theory and work to see, how that collection of data will not work. That's a part of any theory. So we have to work on how it's probable or possible that something goes on, and how it's possible or probable that very thing does not go on.
I was looking at the power of the black hole and the super black hole. So when we start looking at the moon being in front of the sun and the gravitational pull, at that point when they say the veil is thinner between our world and that world, is that because the blocking of the gravitational pull, or does the moon actually block?
Okay. Okay. Once again, I'm going to have to be a little long-winded here.
Please, this is your show. Go for it, please.
Yeah, yes, but I just wanted to let you know that first of all, one of the things that we do know is that the moon has a much stronger gravitational relationship with the Earth than all the other planets and the sun put together. So the moon has a much more immediate gravitational influence on us than the other celestial bodies. That's why we see that the tides go up and down. That's why the plants are regulated by the gravitational relationship and et cetera, so on. Einstein taught that gravity is more than just a force, that it is actually that gravity is created by celestial bodies moving that form a well or like a wake around it, and that depending on the size, the mass, and the motion of these various bodies, that's what determines the gravitational relationship. the other thing that we are now beginning to really examine in great detail is that gravity is not really a force itself, that actually that it is more of a relationship of the electrons and also our consciousness or intention that influences what we call gravity. So once again, there's more than one interpretation as to what these things are and how they work. Many years ago, I remember reading in the newspaper, they had, through scientific methods, come up with a force that was involved with gravity, counter to gravity, and that it was only 1/100th the the influence of gravity, but it was going in the opposite direction, or that is to say that it had a levitational force that was overcoming gravity at any time. So for me to translate what that means in everyday language, it means that within the gravity or the energy that's holding us down, that there's another counter energy that is overcoming that pulling energy. Now, and that relates to your question, because, I've sat there and had my popcorn in the bowl and watched 100 different specials on black holes, and they all say that once you get past the escape horizon, that nothing, can overcome the pull of the black hole, and you get sucked in and you get shredded, and now you're down to atoms and nanoparticles, and you all get destroyed, and it's beyond the end of the world. At the same time, and then also they always talk about the singularity, that there's this thing at the other end that pulls you in and does all this other stuff. My only issue with that is no one has yet been able to show me one singularity in our entire universe. So in examining this and in me going and talking with some of these leading scholars in the field, they will say that energy escapes from the black hole, and I'll just use the term that we can relate to, one atom at a time. So there is a force that overcomes that great pulling of the black hole. It's almost like you go in, you put the stuff in the blender, and some stuff comes out the top. It's just not in the same form that it went into. And it is interesting that science, always tells us, matter can neither be created nor destroyed. So in terms of whether we understand these things or not, one of the scientific experiments or projects that we can use is trying to activate that anti-gravitational or levitational property. And I'm not just talking about walking on water. I mean us able to use part of ourselves to rise up above the situation that we find ourselves in. Just remember that the word gravity comes from the word grave, and levitation comes from the word levity, which has to do with the breaking up of energy. That's why, when we make jokes, it's called levity, because that has the ability to break up a lot of tension in the body and in our consciousness.
That's very powerful, because I'm trying to give our audience some idea of how important it is. When we look at the placement of the moon and then the effects of it. You know what I mean? Have you ever tried to synchronize doing ritual through the high and low tide? And because that's a direct effect of the water that's not pulled on the oceans, but also the water that would be pulled within your body. You know, have you tried that?
Well, once again, my brother, I'm trying to be polite, so I'm only laughing on the inside. What I mean by that is, every time I charge up water, I always take into consideration the high and low tides, and you know, in other words, have I ever done that? I've done that repeatedly for the last almost 50 years in terms of charging up my water, depending on the high and low tide, when I'm watering my plants and the effect that it has on, growing things. Once again, the scientific community and even beyond the scientific community, people for thousands of years have known that when you make wine or beer, that there is an influence that the moon has on these liquid substances, and therefore you really, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you try to block out these influences, that, different batches of liquids will be slightly different from each other. And so rather than trying to control these things, what I have tried to observe from a scientific and just from a day-to-day standpoint is what is the effect of these things on me. So I might have, there's certain waters that I have that are high tide waters, and there's certain waters that I have that are low tide waters. And I suggest that, people, because, in most newspapers, they in farmers' almanacs and things, they tell us what the high tide and low tide is for every day. And to, really charge up the water at the high tide and low tide and drink that water and see if we can notice any effect or what effect it has on us. Now, one thing that I will say is, and I've said this before, that when people tell me that the moon, as regards to our water, has no effect on us, on them, that the moon not only pulls, when the moon is going, is facing the earth, that it's pulling all the water in the world toward it. So that's why you have low tide on the opposite side, because it's literally pulling that water closer to the side that it's on. And that's why you have the high tide on the side that the moon is facing. But what also should be added to that is the fact that the moon is also pulling the land mass toward itself. So it's lifting the land mass up like 8, 9, 12 inches toward itself before it passes to the other side. To say that, this celestial orb is pulling all the water on Earth and all the land, the continents, toward itself and not influencing me, I think is I must be a pretty bad mofo, In other words, yes, it does have an effect, and even in terms of digestion and thinking.
Thank you. And because I want the family to know that, because you got a lot of people looking at. I even have friends coming down from Baltimore, and you have a lot of people looking at how to optimize this. And so what we're going to do, we're slowly working into giving people how to optimize it, what the things they have on their rituals. So family, what Brother Lester is saying, and it happens twice a day, I think, that we have high and low tide or something like that.
That's right. That's right.
So when you're looking at maximizing your ritual, when they say the veil between these two worlds gets thinner, it happens twice a day. So, look at also getting up, seeing where the high tide is in your area, because like if you're in the Midwest, look at high tide and low tide in New Mexico or around Baja, California. If you're on the coast, it's easier to determine it. But if you're in the Midwest, you got to look at other places that have high and low tide in South America, and then just draw an azimuth straight up to where you at and say, okay, it's going to be about that time also for me. So when you look at doing your high and low tide, the effects on, do you think the effects of the eclipse and that gravitational pull is stronger because you got, first of all, let me go back. I want to get into, how do they calculate? I mean, you got 3 planets bouncing around in space, spinning. They're all being pulled by a black hole, the super black hole that holds the Milky Way together. Then we have our own black hole. And then you got the sun's gravitational pull and the moon's black, and you got all of these things bouncing around. How do they calculate when at some point all 3 planets is on the same horizontal level? How do they do that? Because 13 times the moon goes in front of the sun, 13 times a year. But it's only one time maybe a year.
You can see the star come out.
Where the moon, sun, and the earth block each other out because they're on the same horizontal plane.
Look at
How is that determined?
Well, it's determined.
That's
I mean, brother, this is not as mystical as it may seem.
Okay.
We know that the moon comes up 51 minutes later every day.
Mine ain't just for the light.
And so, I don't count the number of minutes, but I know if I go out at night at 9 o'clock and the moon is coming up, I know if I go out the next night at 9 o'clock, the moon is not coming up. So as it circles the Earth, it's in a slightly different position each day than it was before, and so they only link up as far as eclipses 4 times a year. There are 4 eclipses every year: 2 lunar and 2 solar. Just remember, the image that we have of our solar system is this flat, linear interpretation that the sun's in the middle and the planets are spinning around it like a record needle on a record. But in fact, the sun is moving and the planets are spinning, up and down around it. It's not just flat like they present it to us. Everything is moving, spinning, and spiraling. And so that's part of your answer, is that as long as you look at, the planets, or we imagine the planets to be on a flat plane, we don't get the spiraling effect.
Okay. And I'm not. Maybe I've taken us off too far off subject. Let me get back on. Can you give some stones that you put on your altar that have a high water content, so you'll have more water that directly be affected by the eclipse and the moon at that time?
Well, of course. I mean, one thing. 2 stones that come to mind immediately is, of course, moonstone and selenite. Now, they don't necessarily have a high water content, but moonstone is named after the moon, for a reason. And selenite is made up of many different very thin crystals that all are aligned together, and that helps to filter. Some of the moonlight and the light that's coming off of us. And when I say filter, what I mean is it helps our light to be, our energy to stay coherent. That a lot of times, depending on all manner of things, from our diet to turning on the news and hearing distressing things, whatever, our emotions, that many of our cells are not spinning at the same rate or spinning in the same direction. But moonstone and selenite, of course, help to reorganize these things so that they're both that they're coherent, that everything's in alignment and everything's moving at the speed that it needs to be moving at. There are many stones that people can go to their stone book and look at. That's called anhydrites, and of course, these are stones that are made in conjunction with water. There are also, almost all stones are made with water, but I would recommend first and foremost Herkimer diamonds, because many of the Herkimer diamonds will still have a bubble of the water that was formed at the time they were formed. And that water that's inside of the Herkimer diamond is hundreds of thousands of years old. So that water has, been influenced by thousands and thousands and thousands of moon cycles. It would help us with coordinating the moon cycle with us. The final, and then of course, one that may not be so obvious is limestone. Limestone, of course, is the stone that is the outside covering for the Great Pyramid, and limestone is the stone that water is formed in on our planet. Water forms in the limestone. So I would always recommend limestone when it relates to any workings with water, simply because it's the birthplace of our water. And remember that your full moon light is positively charged. And okay, without understanding any science, what that basically means is that it has the ability to increase disruption or incoherency in things that are not straight. For things that are aligned and coherent, it will actually make them denser, thicker, or more highly packed. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. If I want my white shirts to be the maximum white, then I'm going to wash them and put them outside when there's a clear night with a full moon, because it will blanch any color, any stains that are in that shirt. It will break those elements or those atoms apart and make that shirt the whitest it could ever be. So, the detergent, of course, is taking out some of the dirt, but the light of the sun hitting the moon is going to break up any other things that are on that shirt.
That's powerful, very powerful. You dropped it. They got rid of all my, so I can't do anything. But yeah, you definitely dropped it. Would you spell anhydrite for the people that's listening? And so for me, do you consider? I looked once and it said opal had a high content. So sometimes when I'm doing water ritual, I put opal around, like that. Right.
Absolutely. Anhydrite is spelled ANHYDRITE.
Anhydrite. Yes, family. So when you look at your stones, even though I know a lot of folks are going to put their stones up, but when you're looking at irradiating a frequency that connects you with water, even if you're blowing on your stones in the middle of this eclipse, stones that have a high water content will echo your intentions, and your creation, just by blowing on them, is going to echo your attention to your creation, because the moon is going to be tugging on those stones harder because of their high content of water.
Well, you see, you know, when you have a full moon, by definition, a full moon is when the moon is on the opposite side of the earth to the sun.
Right.
So to use the term that you used, you've got the gravity of the sun pulling in one direction. Well, the gravity of the sun in the black hole of Sagittarius A pulling in one direction, and you've got the moon's gravitational effect pulling in the other direction. When you got the new moon,
thank you.
then you've got the moon and the sun both pulling in the same direction. So we've always associated that with meaning that your consciousness and your emotions can be aligned. And it just so happens that this eclipse that's coming up is a new moon.
Yes.
So you have a very strong potential for alignment.
So, family, get the selenite. Definitely have some selenite then, because you were mentioning that selenite helps balance things and put them in the right direction also, right?
That's right. And so, selenite is a self-cleaning stone. It doesn't need other stones or sage or any of the other methods that people use for clearing and cleaning their crystals. Now, of course, we can't forget, we cannot leave out from this thing quartz, for the simple reason that quartz and calcite are on 93% of the Earth's surface. So quartz is always going to be a main player whenever we consider anything with stones. I mean, I know people get all kinds of exotic stones and, you know, various versions from different places on the earth. But quartz is working to purify water in the river every day. Quartz, you know, when the chicken is pecking on the ground and it gets those stones in its gullet, well, the stones that it's pecking on the ground is quartz, and it goes into the gullet in order to help purify whatever else that it's eating. So quartz is always going to be a major player. Your spider webbing is made of quartz. I'm going to repeat that. Your spider web is made of quartz. And anybody that got a grandma or a great-great-grandma, you know, they will tell you that when somebody got a wound, a lot of times they go out in the backyard and they get that spider web and then they bind it up and they put it on the wound.
Powerful. You know, that's interesting because I have a spider in the backyard. Just a quick moment. He's about as big as a Kennedy $50.
Yeah.
But that was the first time I ever seen that spider eat its web. It was either eating its web or it was eating another spider's web to get it out the way so it could put its web up. But like, this thing is eating its web. So that's powerful. So when you look at some of the things to put on your altar, look at quartz, your selenite, your opal. The Herkimer diamond, that was special. You dropped the bomb on me that one, and I appreciate that, you know, because Herkimer diamond is also a double terminated stone. So your intent and the shapes. You know, one thing, like I make, now you've taught me something, because I make orgone. that really kind of works with basically your chakras in your hand. It works best with your chakras in your hand. But if a person can't feel it, I put selenite in their opposite hand. You know, and I just imagine the selenite was pulling through, because if I put selenite in the opposite hand, they automatically start to feel their chakras open. So your explanation on selenite is powerful, and definitely folks have to. Let's stay in that vein, but let's look at plants that you can put on your altar that may have a higher water content, you know.
Okay, well, immediately what comes to mind is your succulents. You know, any cactus, and any you know, if you go to the plant store or wherever you get the plants, you ask them for the succulents, because you know they're used to, they originally grew in an environment where they didn't get water all the time, so they're used to storing a great deal of water inside of themselves for times when there's a lack of water. Now,
succulent. Could you spell succulent for us?
Yes, succulent is SUCCULENTS. Succulents.
Okay. And I apologize.
No problem. And of course, you know, we got the thing that they brought over with us. You know, the mighty watermelon.
Wow. Ooh, good one. Wow.
Watermelon is over 90% water. You know, and once again, I'm not going to go into a big long scientific explanation, but that water is in a highly energized state, and you know, because you know, you drink watermelon juice and that stuff will clear you out. So I always recommend, you know, having a slice of watermelon as a ritual. Just leave it there for a day or two, or just get a baby watermelon and put it on the altar. Watermelon is also a very, very powerful plant to relate to the water element.
Very powerful. Cactus. You mentioned cactus.
Yes.
That gives me an explanation. A long time ago in '89, I had a friend that they taught me a cleansing ritual, you know, and then they had me doing that ritual with a cactus, and I didn't quite understand it. It worked, but I didn't quite understand it. But that's powerful, you know, family. If you know, because you can go get a small cactus at Lowe's and Home Depot, and you can have your cactus there. The watermelon is excellent. You see what I mean?
Well, then also, but you've also got your cucumber. You know, your cucumber is also a very good thing to relate to water as well. Cucumber and your pickle. You know.
Okay. What about aloe?
Aloe is another one. Now, see, when it comes to aloe, you know, just like anything, you know, it gains more. It has, what I'm trying to say is that you want to work with your aloe, particularly after 4 years of age. Aloe doesn't really hit its stride in terms of its healing properties. It will work, but it needs to be 5 or more years old in order for it to really, really, you know, once it ages and matures, aloe, and any member of the aloe family, because there's more than one type of aloe, you know, aloe is an excellent thing. Now, of course, you know, there's some people out in your group, I'm sure, that's heard of aloe ferox, and the aloe ferox plant is an amazing thing to work with for both healing and maintaining positive health. So any members of the aloe family, you want to work with them, but you don't want to, you want to, have that aloe mature. So keep your aloe plant around. Don't cut off all the, let it grow for quite some time. It's going to take a while, but the reward is very, very great.
And, and a tidbit for you brothers out there that, deal with the high blood pressure medicine, aloe multiplies things. So, like, if you eat some watermelon rind and some aloe, it turns into a very decent and natural aphrodisiac. Because aloe multiplies. Even if you put the aloe with the watermelon on your ritual, it helps multiply. I just did like a little light. I watched a couple videos on it recently, and I was talking to a friend of mine about aloe and the effect of eating aloe and how it multiplies things that you consume. And we all know that, watermelon rind is Viagra, even though they made a very nasty joke about that. And also, I guess, I'd be remiss that this is Revolutionary Day. I think the 21st is when Nat Turner started his particular revolt and revolution, like that. So this energy in relationship to seeing what Trump is doing, then we see this particular time when you start looking at your water and all these items, look at that. When we start wanting to look at our condition and starting to change our condition as a people, not necessarily freedom, but getting us to coagulate so economic system that works for us, because pretty soon, because our president, we won't have an economic system that will work for us, because he's a white supremacist. Then consider, that in doing this ritual that you look at that. Our ancestors are big time, Brother Lester Loving. Is there a particular bark from a tree that would be full of a certain type of water that would work for us, to also add?
Most bark would be a good thing to put on your altar to work with, because trees by their very nature are pulling water up out of the ground. In other words, they're overcoming gravity. And so, before I forget, another stone that would be very good for this purpose is amber.
Thank you.
And not only is it the solidified sap of the tree, but it is very ancient. And so you got, in many cases, millions of years worth of information and or knowledge that it's accumulated, and on occasion there will be water inside of the amber, or okay. I'm sorry. I'm interrupting my own flow, because when it comes to the proper regulation of water and consciousness, we want to have the pine cone. And you want your pine cone to be, you want it to be in association with water. So if you can get a pine cone before it has dried out, you want to get a pine cone and you want to keep it in water. Now, if you just leave it in water, it'll grow mold or fungus on it. So you got to change the water on a regular basis. But your closed pine cone has a direct correspondence with the pineal gland, which is named after it.
That's powerful. Should they put it on their head or just keeping it builds your water and the stones and the amber. You know, and another thing, family, what Lester meant about it, if you go to RT, they did a special recently, and it's probably still up, on the forces that are being destroyed because of the amber mining in Russia. And it's very serious because these people take these huge pumps and they are in mass because they don't want to be identified. So they're out there like the old time moonshiners, but they're taking these huge pumps and they're just spraying in to this marsh, and they're getting all that ancient amber up like that. And then they're actually selling it and helping pay for their municipalities and keep things going, because some parts of Russia, they're poor, but they're using the amber, you know, like that. And it's very serious. So what you said is true, because it's raised in water within itself, you know, just like we are, you know.
Right.
I, for one, I guess, and then we'll let them deal with their altar. And there are two more things, and then we'll let them, you know, gave them enough for the altar. A particular animal and a particular picture. You know, if we could go into, you know, some people, if there's a feather or a bird feather, should they have a duck feather because of the effects of water on the duck, or is there a particular animal? I mean, cat hair, I will put on my altar, you know, just because that dimensional thing that cat hair has.
Right.
You know, but is there a particular animal that comes to mind?
Well, yeah. Well, you know, almost any feather, is significant, because, you know, your birds can, you know, can even fly in while it's raining. You know, normally they don't, but they can. You know, of course, you know, I would consider the falcon feather, because, you know, they fly and hunt during the day and the night. So that covers, you know, all your dimensions.
Wow.
Any of the birds that you see on these nature specials that, you know, that fly and dive down and you know, hunt the fish, you know, would be excellent. Your pelican would be a good feather to use. Now, and of course, you know, the animal that immediately came up to me was your either your water moccasin or your sea serpent. There are many members of the snake family that you know, because snakes can swim, and so your snake skin would also be good for relating to water. But you want to get your sea snakes, because many of them will swim between islands. They will swim from one island to another. And then, of course, you've got your snail shell, because your snail has the ability to create its own lubrication and traps. That's the radio station.
Very powerful, very powerful. I like that. The falcon and the snake, I'm loving that. You know, like that. And I appreciate it because it helps us to maximize. Because like, what do we do now? You've taught them how to meditate, how to get to certain levels of their planning from 1 year to 5 years. You see what I mean, like that, and then we're helping them what to put on your altar because these things resonate with water and the energy that pull. I guess my question is, and this is going to be a little more scientific, when you think and that energy goes out the top of your head, does it go out positive to negative, so your energy travels out of you negative and it goes to a positive source, or is it in helter-skelter, or do we really know?
Oh no, we scientifically know it goes from positive to negative, and from negative to positive. Yes, I mean, especially the more work that we do, the more meditating we do, the more Tai Chi we do, the more we do. It's not so much that it will go from negative to positive, positive to negative. It's that it goes out farther from us.
Okay. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this has been measured for quite some time.
Say that again, brother?
I said this has been measured for quite some time, and now it used to be that we go to the psychic fairs and we get our little Curlian photograph, but now they have Curlian movie cameras, so you can literally see your energy field become more coherent depending on what stone you put, or drinking certain types of water, or many different things.
Cool. And this is because I let it drop, but I want to go back. I don't know how much time we have, but your pyramids, what was the effect of your pyramids do in enhancing what they're doing during this period? And can they get in touch with you to try to purchase the pyramid? And if they do, give your information, And I don't know.
Okay, well,
that type of. Go ahead.
Okay, well, first of all, we have to talk about the power of the Umbra. Okay, and this goes into the ancient, as you would call it, ritual. Once we understand it, we understand that it's a scientific principle. That if you think back to all those, when we were kids and we used to see all those movies about, Arabia or the African potentates, the queen, the king, in ancient Egypt where the person has the fan and they're fanning whoever, well, one of the things that they always had as that person was going through the streets or traveling from place to place, they always had somebody that carried the royal parasol. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I wish I could get a picture up for them, but yes.
Okay, yeah. Well, see, once again, somebody peeped the knowledge that if you were to take your magnetometer out and you measure the energy underneath that umbrella, and then you put that magnetometer out into the light, that there's actually more energetics underneath the umbrella than there is in the light itself. So wow. being in the shadow, and of course the real power, if we're going to talk about earthly understandings, comes from where you have the penumbra, or that's the scientific word of where the shadow and the light energy meet, because that's what creates color. When darkness and light are interacting, that's the birthplace of all color. So having yourself under that umbra or underneath that umbrella in the presence of light means that you're energizing yourself and keeping yourself aligned, so that you keep your same intention no matter how far you're traveling. So now I'm trying to answer your question about the pyramid. People that put the pyramids on their head, and of course we would recommend a solid one for this particular thing, you're creating your own umbra, that your actual consciousness is, or your crown chakra is being energized by staying within your own energy field, regardless of what the light relationship around that. Now, of course, at the moment of the eclipse, which is 2.5 minutes, you're going to actually be exposed to the darkness of the sun as well as the light rays, because, see, once again, the power of the eclipse is just the same thing. You've got, the relationship of darkness and light working together. And so that is a time to take in the energy, which will help to refresh us and align us with what our spiritual intent is, why we are here. Okay, and then the light comes back out, and so we're supposed to then, over time, release that intention through physical manifestation.
That's very powerful. That's very powerful. I'm glad you added that, because understanding to absorb the energy and then release it. Should it be a time lapse as they release it? When they absorb it, do they need to take it in and hold their breath for a period of time to make sure they absorb it? Or is it just being under your pyramid like the umbra, and then that's all going to take place for you?
Well, see, once again, depending on what the intent is, that will regulate the breathing. I know that everybody would say, no, there's a special ritual or whatever, but, different jobs or different missions will require a different breathing and a different type of breathing. Of course, I would recommend breathing in and holding that, and then releasing it as we go into the umbra. And in other words, as the moon starts to cover the sun, taking a deep breath, and then take a deep breath at the height of the eclipse, so like 75 seconds in, and then as the moon edges out of it. So not as it hits the edge of it, but as the last part of the moon is uncovering from the sun on the other side.
I got you.
So as the moon first starts to cover it, then when it's completely covered, and then as the moon is completely leaving it, right at that last point, and then of course, there's two more things I want to say, and that is, there might be a chance to see the wedding ring or the diamond ring. It's a point of the eclipse where there's a flash, just like it looks like a diamond ring, and it will flash. And depending on where we are, you may or may not see it, but that's highly significant. There was one other thing I wanted to say. Hold on.
Take your time.
Well, let's keep talking because it'll come back to me.
Okay. Because I've seen some of like what you're saying, when it's at some point you get that flash, then it starts to cover the sun. So that's very,
right.
very powerful. And speaking of flashes, there was a time ago that in Japan they flashed this red, and I don't know if you heard of it or not,
uh-huh.
And it knocked out all these Japanese kids because there's whites in Pokemon. So we know the effects of color, and so to get that flash, it could energize you. So definitely, family, make sure you get your glasses, right. But look for that.
Right. Right.
Because that'll
Absolutely.
penetrate really deep inside in terms of triggering something self-consciously, or that flash could give you a message that you may not realize till 5 years later, and you're like, why am I doing this? And it'll be because certain messages
right.
came.
Right. Right. Okay, now I remember the other thing. And that is, we just, last year we were talking about the fact that the sun was in the peak of the sunspot cycle. Okay? And the sunspot cycle occurs every 11 years. And so when we look at the sun through photographs, we'll see that the sun looks red or orange, but then there'll be a black spot on the picture, and that's where the sunspot is. Now, the sunspot is a place where magnetic energy is flowing out of the sun, and it's black because it is cooler. It is cooler than the rest of the surface of the sun. One of the phenomenon that we in the scientific community have observed this year is that the sun has started to have what they now call white spots. And these white spots obviously is where that area of the sun is hotter than the surrounding area. And so therefore the sun is taking in energy. So we know, because this is something that we haven't really observed before, we know that the sun is taking in energy because it's refueling itself for some change or some transformation. So naturally, if that's what the sun is doing, then this is the time that we should be taking in energy for our transformation. And one of the things that all these planetary influences, there's a lot of stuff happening. We got 5 planets retrograde. We're at the end of the meteor showers, which happens every year at this time. The sun has white spots. And so, therefore, when we put all that together, it's telling us to broaden our parameters and go outside of the normal arenas that we normally plant our seeds in. Go beyond, where we normally go.
It's dark. You can see the star come out.
People in other communities, in other countries, in other dimensions.
Look at that, Booby.
That have something that we can share with them and exchange energy with.
That's nice, man.
So,
wow.
It's funny.
It's dark.
But our
It's nighttime.
Is talking about people having to speak English. But in fact, it's just the opposite.
Mine ain't either.
We should be
mine ain't Justin for the light.
At learning other languages and or being anticipating running into people who are coming here who don't speak the same language that we do.
Getting dark.
Because through the translation, meaning through expanding our consciousness and trying to understand people, it's going to broaden us and give us a greater appreciation of the world at large.
So we need, you know what I mean? There's an image of us as the rest of the world is wondering what the hell wrong with us. You know what I mean? Like they kind of like, what's the American Negro? Like that.
Right.
So definitely.
It's dark.
While we're in that vein,
you can see the star come out.
Like some scientific conspiracy. I've had 2 of my friends Foreman. One believed an earthquake was going to follow thereafter that. The other one said that the last time we had a type of eclipse similar to this, 40 days later, we were in a world war. Do you have any feelings about this eclipse, the energy, which way we might go?
Mine ain't either.
if at all. You know,
No.
we
Mine,
even speak
mine ain't
about the
Justin for
I
the light.
map. You know what I mean, or the I am map. That
Right.
and does that the eclipse as it's ushering in new energy? Will it usher a change in America in terms of a war or the, like you say, for us to change our attitude and have an awakening and becoming more in line with the rest of the world? You know, we're unique. You know, it's like America. We as Americans, it's like we were on the island. You know what I'm saying? You know, there's a lot of other cultures that knowing two languages is just natural. You know what I mean?
That's
we
right.
barely learn English. You know what I'm saying? Like that. And so it's interesting. So have you got any thought on a conspiracy? If we can play with it a little bit.
Okay. When it comes to earth changes, because that's the category that's known as earth changes. I always tell people earth changes are telling us that we have to sharpen our senses and our awareness. So what I mean by that is if something's coming, then just like the animals, we have to hone and sharpen our ability to sense these things coming so that we can know when to get to higher ground, so to speak. One of the things that we also know from observation over many, many, many decades is that when the earthquake is to California, when they've had the earthquakes in the past, that 2 or 3 days before the earthquake, the cats disappeared. Because they're feeling the seismic energy. They're feeling the rocks and the things underneath the pressure. They're feeling it moving upward. So in other words, I'm not saying that these earth changes are going to happen. I'm not saying that they're not going to happen. But anytime someone is telling me about a particular earth change, I first of all sharpen my senses, and the second thing I do is I look to see if they're preparing for the very earth change that they're talking to me about. If they're just talking to me about earth changes and they ain't doing anything different, then they're just talking.
I got you. Yeah. That I understand. You know, because there's a lot of people. I just know when you look at what's going on in our White House and all those changes, including Charlottesville, you know, with the eclipse, then if new energy is going to come, then something old of what they're doing in the White House is getting ready to die out. You know what I mean? And
now here's the flip. Yeah, I know what you mean, but here's the flip side of that. The flip side of that is if enough people start to prepare for this, whatever the earth change is, on more than one occasion, because you have such a focus of energy, you will actually either lessen that earth change or prevent it from happening. So not all the time when people say something's coming and then it doesn't come and then people tease them and say, oh, you were wrong, it didn't happen. No, they were right. They got the proper prescription, but because enough people prepared for it, they literally changed the arithmetic and were able to influence that earthly matter.
I can see that. Back in November 2013, I met some friends in my Reiki class, and they said at some point in excess of 2,000 shamans was coming to Greenville. You know, and what I'm hearing, Monday will probably be a day that people will they will be in this area. Because, they're looking at millions of people coming to this area. So that's what's powerful. Brother Lester Love, they have been playing with the whole thing today. Like my introduction back to Blog Talk, how we have these interruptions. We got 9 minutes. Give your information so if people want to get in touch with you, they can. And family, don't worry. I think I'm going to try to rerun this tomorrow for the people that missed it, because we gave a lot of valid information. So I need to rerun it so people know what to put on their altars. We definitely appreciate it. So please give your information before they kick us off today.
Okay, well, my contact number is 215-609-6586. I'll repeat it again. I also want to say that we should continue with whatever rituals that we're doing. We should do a daily thing to remind ourselves of this momentous occasion. And we should start to see physical results by the 10th of September. So, because a lot of times people do something on the day of the event, and then they go back to their mundane lives, and then the energy that they put out starts to showing up, and we haven't done our dishes, we haven't made our ark, So this is really the time for example, since you talked a great deal about water, one of the things that people can do is to just simply put out a small container of water at the time of the eclipse, and then take that water home, put it on the shelf in the closet, and then take a couple of drops, take eyedropper, and take in the water, a few drops of the water, and put it in your drinking water every day, and that will keep your cells reminded that you're on the lookout, that you're doing your planning, but also that you're looking for the manifestation of these things, because there's going to be a tremendous increase in the synchronicities that happen after this event. I would also say that people should be, that their ears should be perked up, just like a cat or a dog, for running into the proper people at this time and staying away from the improper people at this time. There's going to be a lot of people moving around, and we want to stay away from negative forces and be attracted to people that can amplify what we're here to do. So my number, once again, is 215-609-6586. People can call me. I answer my phone, and, can give little updates, because the closer we come to this thing, the more information that will be coming through.
Family, definitely get with his energy, get with the pyramid, so you can, not only maybe you can hang one over your bed, so when you sleep,
absolutely, yes,
your body,
yes. But if you hang it, or you can hang it over your bed, or you can place it underneath your bed. I recommend that people get a small pyramid that they put underneath the seat of their car or on their dashboard, and put a description of the things that you're trying to attract and the things that you want to keep away from you. Write them down and put them inside of that pyramid. It's even more powerful if you read it every day or you recite it every day. You don't want to just have a pyramid, because a pyramid is an amplifier. And I say that to say, that, you don't want to have your pyramid hanging up and you turn it on the news and get breaking news about some craziness, every day. That's going to amplify your fear, your anxiety, your whatever. You want to stay clearly to the universe that which you want to have amplified, and then have then put your pyramid up or have it underneath your bed at this time.
Very powerful, because I sleep with an organ. One other thing, right quick. This morning I got up. I was working with a magnet, and I wanted to get at it. So if you have a magnet on you, does that help organize your thought when it goes out the top of your head? And then I want to pry into your personal business. Like, what are you going to do Monday? Are you going to have a group with you? Or are you going somewhere and be with Lester Loving only?
Well, see, once again, science tells us that when we're putting out our affirmations or our intentions, that we want to face the south pole of the magnet outward, away from our bodies. So if we're doing our prayers, our meditations, our breathing, whatever we're putting out, we want to have the south pole of the magnet facing outward. When we're trying to attract that which we pulled out, then we want to turn that magnet around and face it so that the north pole of the magnet is facing out. And you should do both. You shouldn't do just one. You want to put your stuff out and then turn that around so that you're pulling it towards yourself. And repeat as needed until manifestation comes about.
Okay, 3 minutes. Where are you going? Lightheartedly. If it's personal, you don't. But on the lighthearted, are you with a group or are you by yourself?
Oh no, I'll be in the Northeast Kingdom, otherwise known as Vermont.
Wow.
I'm actually going further away from the Umbra.
Wow, that's deep. Very deep. Well, I'm here in Carolina. I think I'm going to go, and when the sister get here, we may go down to actually Anderson, because it seems like the eclipse is following. At some point, the tracks are crossing into North Carolina, then it followed the Saluda River down in Columbia, South Carolina. But it basically follows the Saluda River. So I'm going to go and align myself somewhere around the Saluda River. And so, because I just want to be when if the shadow goes over or whatever it does, I want to be by some water, and it's given the perfect opportunity because it's going straight down even when it goes into Lake Murray in Columbia, it's coming right down the Saluda River. So it's cool. But anyway, we have 1 minute left.
Okay, and the other thing I wanted to say is that as the eclipse starts to happen, because everybody keeps focusing on the exact moment of the eclipse, but the whole thing is a transformational time period. So from about 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, you're in that energy field, and what I want to say is, when the birds start singing, to start whistling or singing along with them, because the birds will start singing.
Cool. Definitely appreciate it. And look for it, family. I'm gonna try to either run it Friday or maybe Saturday, because it's very what Lester has given us is very powerful. I wish I could squeeze it in where we could play it and then go back live with Brother Lester so y'all can have your questions, because I know y'all got questions. But I may try to work that out. Thank you, Brother Lester. I appreciate you. Thanks for considering the Ring Stone Network as part of where you want to give information. And you're always welcome to come back. And thank you, Ring Stone Network family, because I've been off all summer. And, some of my friends been calling my phone like I can't get on, and I had to shift y'all, so I apologize. But we may try to work something out so we can get some Q&A. Okay?
Yes.
All right. And what I'll do is I'll give you a call. Thank you.
All right. Nuke poo nuke, everyone.